Hello and welcome to Recyclist. I'm your host, Eric Provost, and I am being joined by a very special guest right now. Unfortunately, we were not able to link up this past week at ParkCon, but I'm really happy to finally bring to the show right now the new project or a new project director for SES Engineers. Let me welcome to the show, Michelle Langdon, PE. Thank you so much for joining me today, ma'am.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And again, I just kind of mentioned Archon. As we're recording this, it happened a couple weeks ago. And unfortunately, we weren't able to cross paths. It was a hugely busy, event, but I was not able to congratulate you on your award. I've had the opportunity to talk to a few other Archon Award recipients over the past couple weeks and months, and you yourself received I believe the Professional Achievement Award from SWANA specifically for the private sector, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, very honored to have received that award. Yeah, it was. Yeah, and you're right. Boy, Archon, it was amazing. There was so much going on. I think Swana did such a great job of keeping everybody engaged, and there was always either a great session or a dinner or a networking event. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And I know that specifically, you found out about the award, and SWANA quoted you as saying, "I'm incredibly honored to receive this award from SWANA. The mentors and colleagues I've met through this organization and my work have been key to any impact I've made in this field." So you really feel like SWANA has had that significant of an impact on your career thus far?
Absolutely. I definitely would not be here where I'm at in the fortunate place to where I'm at without Swana. Like a lot of people in this industry, I kind of fell into it. I didn't go to school to be a landfill engineer, but I got into it not really knowing, what all was involved with the landfill or solid waste, especially engineering and solid waste. And I got involved with the Swan Beaver chapter right away. Luckily, my boss at the time was very involved, and I met some just amazing people that were always there to answer a question, advise me on a class to take, kind of bring me in and make me feel comfortable at these big events where there's hundreds of people and I don't know anybody. So I very, very fortunate. And without that networking opportunity, without that mentorship, I definitely would have struggled a little bit in the industry.
How soon into the industry did you get before you were introduced to SWANA?
Literally within weeks, I remember at my computer, new engineer out of school, sitting at the landfill. I'd had the job about, I don't know, a week, and I was literally Googling landfills, solid waste, engineering, and Swana popped up, of course. And so that is, yeah. So within my first week or two, is when I got introduced to Swana, and I remember going in and telling my boss, Dan, I'm like, "There's this great organization we should get involved in," and he's like, "Oh yeah, he's like, I'm the treasurer for the chapter."
But getting involved and meeting a lot of people and networking and all this stuff, you say it's had a significant impact on your career. Clearly, you've made an impact on the organization. What was your reaction when you learned that they had chosen you for this award?
uh, Definite surprise. I at that point, I didn't even know I'd been nominated. So to actually get the award was pretty surprising. And yeah, I was so honored and so flattered to have been chosen for it. I just, yeah, especially to think of where it came from. That first couple of weeks googling Swana, and now I'm receiving an award from them. It's fantastic.
And it was kind of a weird double whammy. It's clearly been a very couple busy months for you because I introduced you obviously as a project director for SES engineers, but even that is very recent.
It is.
You basically announced your new position as part of the receiving the award, essentially, right?
Yes, that is exactly what happened. I had put my notice in with my company, and of course, it was I knew that I was going to SES, but I hadn't told anybody else. And so when I gave Swana the information that I was changing to SC, or that I was about to move to SCS, I didn't realize they were going to, or I didn't think about the fact that they were going to be announcing the award. And so, yes, the Swana announced for me that I was moving to SCS. So it worked out great. I didn't have to make a bunch of phone calls.
Well, another part of what they quoted you when you received the award, you said, um, I'm especially grateful to the operators I've had the privilege to work alongside. Your knowledge, skill, work ethic, and patience have taught me more than any textbook. I assume you're talking about the people at your previous company, Great West, was it?
Throughout my whole career, really, and definitely at Great West, but even prior to that, when I worked at Lane County, I literally had operators, equipment operators, truck drivers beat common sense into my engineering brain. Well, not literally, but they were like so many people in the industry. I always say we're kind of like this. I feel like we're this special breed of people in the best possible way, and I feel that way, especially about the operators, the guys or girls on the front lines doing the work. They were so patient with me. Again, fresh engineer, fresh, new on the landfill, and uh, yeah, boy, some of the stories I could tell. They really taught me a lot about just the way to operate a landfill, so that I could incorporate that into my designs. uh, I just, yeah, I really can't even thank them enough. In fact, I it made such an impact on my career and my life that um, I've been in charge of the Northwest Rodeo now for 10, 12, 13 years, because it's one little thing I can do to give back to the operators and drivers.
Well, you know, I didn't just bring you here to congratulate you, and that award was 2 weeks ago, so I'm sure the bosses are already like, okay, on to the next job. Congratulations, but time to get back to work. And like I said, I didn't just bring you on here to congratulate you. I think you and I can have a really interesting conversation about some of the stuff going on within the industry right now. A few things that I think would behoove a lot of landfill operators and landfill owners to know about, because obviously, as you mentioned, landfill engineering, landfill operations, which you just touched on, we're at a point where we are seeing a lot of evolution within the industry from a technical standpoint, from a technological standpoint, and um, I know that specifically one of the big areas that you've been working in when it comes to engineering is retrofitting a lot of these landfills with new infrastructure, new technologies, and stuff like that. And I've had a lot of people on the show, and we've talked about emerging technologies and new construction and new projects. But there are so many landfills out there that are decades old that the infrastructure and the construction that happened all those many years ago, it's time to look at it again. I mean, landfills are famously not exactly the most, you know they're not exactly the most salient of environments. There's a lot of toxic chemicals that eat away at concrete and eat away at plastic and rubber and all these construction materials over the years. And I wonder if a lot of landfill operators and a lot of engineers are aware of the current state of the infrastructure of their own landfills. And honestly, I'm just kind of excited to get into it. What are you seeing when you're taking on these projects, and what are you seeing from both your side and the landfill operator slash engineer slash technician side?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing is that landfill managers, owners, operators are painfully aware of degrading infrastructure. And I do want to sort of point out that when I say degrading infrastructure, I don't mean the environmental protection elements. These liners and such, they're made for 1,000 years plus. But things like access roads, pump stations, shop buildings. We and especially transfer stations. When RCRA made the major changes in early '90s, had a lot of landfills close, transfer stations open, and that's been, 30, 35 years ago. And the useful life of a transfer station is probably, maybe 25 years. And so I think a lot of the infrastructure that has been used in the last 30 years has been sort of scabbed on as operations are expanding and regulations have required the transfer stations to do more with or different types of operations at their transfer stations. And so things that the size of things are sort of undersized now. The actual infrastructure is needing to be replaced or remodeled. Crew rooms are, sometimes non-existent because, when these things were built 35 years ago, there was one person at the site, and now there's a dozen. And I think when COVID hit, it really highlighted uh, that need for a lot of small communities that have been just sort of plugging along with the best they can, that get this influx of people, and that sort of plugging along just isn't working anymore.
Well, what are you seeing in terms of individual pieces of infrastructures or anything that stands out to you as we're having to replace so many of these in recent years? Or is there any one particular area of construction or retrofitting that has stood out to you as, wow, this, we're seeing a lot of these. This is a big pain point for a lot of landfill engineers. Maybe more people should be looking into their own.
Absolutely. I think that transfer station buildings and transfer station floors, and a lot of times even just the loading areas or the loading chutes, have been, they were originally configured to take in a certain amount of waste, and now they're not configured anymore for these increased volumes. Or the building itself was designed to take, 5 passenger cars, and now it's taking 2 commercial vehicles and 10 passenger cars at one time. So really, I think the transfer building itself is what I'm seeing the most of, really needing repairs and upgrades. And in addition to that, I think the other thing that I'm seeing so much of are at the transfer stations and landfills is people need more room, and not just to expand the landfill, but they need more room for recycling. They need more room to have a metals pile or metals bin. They need more room to collect green waste. Maybe they want to start a composting operation. I think having adequate room for a lot of people limits what they can do nowadays, unfortunately. And then I think at landfills themselves, um, again, going for so many years, I think our operators really just tried to sort of keep up with things, and a lot of maintenance went by the wayside. I know when I worked at the landfill, we tried, and it seemed like we were always in repair mode, so we could never get to maintenance mode. And now that, after years and years of doing that, things finally come to a head, and you really have to get on that maintenance, because things break down and have to be replaced. And so, yeah, seeing a lot of maintenance programs really needing attention.
I wonder if one of the big hiccups is, you know, some of these landfills that have aging infrastructure that really need updating. Uh, do you see that people are holding off because they don't understand the scope, or holding off because of budgetary issues, or they want new versus replacing old, and they try to ride out the old stuff as long as possible? What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing with landfill operators maybe not recognizing stuff in time, or potentially not understanding the scope of their problems? Is that an issue that you're seeing?
Sort of. So I think from the landfill operator's perspective, they see it.
Yeah.
They just need the funds to make the projects happen. And sometimes the person holding the purse string, so to speak, is not the most well informed in solid waste or landfill operations. And so they telling them that you need X, Y, and Z because of aging infrastructure, things like that. Well, they're sort of they don't understand the sometimes the importance of what that infrastructure is supporting. I mean, we are solid waste is sort of like the redheaded stepchild, so to speak, of the utilities. It's not glamorous. People think that trash fairies just come in and take everything away, but it's we're right there with sewer and water and power, and we've seen in what happens when trash doesn't get picked up. We've had some strikes and things like that, and it's a health issue. So people that don't understand that or don't realize that or don't connect that landfill is not a nuisance or a environmental you know toxic leaching thing. It is actually providing a very valuable service, and it needs to be supported as such. And so when people don't understand that, it's hard to um, give the money to that, especially if there are conflicting things that are all trying to pull money out of the same pot, so to speak. And then also, that money in one route or another comes from the users of the system. And so money's tight for everybody, and we have to balance improving the landfills and getting everything working, and having the infrastructure needed to make things work properly, with balancing that with the rates that the customers are going to pay. And when you're in a small area, the economies of scale, that infrastructure is even harder to pay for, because a new landfill or a landfill expansion or a new maintenance shop at a landfill, doesn't really matter. If your landfills gets 50 tons a day or 500 tons a day, you still need a landfill or maintenance shop or that improvement project, and the the cost per customer goes up at these small facilities where you don't have the huge usership.
Well, specifically using the word retrofit makes me think that, a lot of these transfer stations, a lot of this infrastructure that was built decades ago, a lot of the materials, the techniques, the technology has evolved so much over the past few decades that by the time these things are ready to be fixed and or replaced, do they even really marry up with how we go about making them from the ground up these days? Is it even really viable to go back in and fix something versus just tear it down and making a new one with today's techniques and technology? How does what are you seeing in that regard in terms of, hey, let's just tear it down, build a new one. We've got all this new great stuff that'll last, 100 years longer. But in order to do that, we actually need to tear this thing down to the foundation and rebuild a new one. How often is that happening now?
uh Seldom, very, very seldom, where we're just taking
Okay.
things down to the ground for a variety of reasons. It's more expensive, and a lot of times that transfer station or facility has to stay in operation during the construction. So if you have a great big piece of property or something, and you have the money to, say, build a whole new transfer station and roads and everything while you're while you're running your existing station or existing building, that's sort of like the Cadillac of a retrofit. But really, a lot of times what we're seeing is uh, taking what's there, keeping it in operation, and supplementing it, adding on to the building, adding an additional loading bay. Um, a lot of times, the way that transfer stations were previously built, the building itself, the design is, it's a pre-engineered metal building that hasn't changed much over the years. It's the little finite things like putting how you slope your floors for contact water drainage, and putting up uh, push walls and using metal instead of concrete, these sort of little things that can really enhance operations while using some of the existing facility to the best that we can. And really, that helps to maximize the benefit of the dollar that's being used. Um, yeah, so I think I'm seeing a lot. I feel like we've had to be really creative with sites because it seems like they're put in some really weird places sometimes, like up on a hill, or and sometimes they can be very small. And so there's not really a cookie cutter, like, you know, copy paste this design to this new facility. They all are so unique. And like I said, again, almost none of them are really just, you know, erase this and build something totally new.
Well, I'm sure that's good for a lot of people to hear that they won't have to, because I know you just said that, funding money is always going to be one of the biggest hurdles. So not having to throw in all the extra money to tear something down, having all this stuff out there that can be added and supplemented to existing facilities and stations, I think is, it makes sense that people would design stuff that way because the stuff has already been in place for decades
Mm-hmm.
rather than just reinvent the wheel, create things that can be built on top of what's already there. But in terms of even knowing when to start projects like this, what are some good kind of telltale signs, and what should operators and technicians kind of be looking for at their own facilities and landfills for, if they're thinking about proceeding with something like this?
Yeah. So having, I would say that that's sort of a twofold approach. Number one is if you don't have some sort of master plan yet, uh, then get there, because everything that you have at your site is going to need replaced one day, or it's going to need some sort of remodel. Your tipping floor is going to need to be resurfaced or improved upon, repaired. And so getting that in a plan and a schedule, now it's just a roadmap. It's not going to be perfect, but it gives you an idea of, hey, in 10 years we know we're going to have to re-roof the building, so let's you know put back so much money into a reserve fund so that when that comes up we can pay for it. So having that master plan. And then if you don't have that master plan, then as you're working your facility, pay attention to your maintenance, or when you're doing your maintenance, pay attention. Are you starting to see pits and things in your transfer station floor? Are you starting to see some erosion that might need to be addressed? It might even mean bringing in a fresh set of eyes, like somebody that knows nothing about your site, and have them look and have them point out problems. And then you can sort of identify what may need to be fixed early on, while you look at, okay, I think I might have 10 years left on my building, or in 15 years we're pretty sure we're going to be out of office space. And then if you have things like that you might be worried about structurally, or from a geotech stability standpoint, there's things you look for: cracking, of course, not necessarily in the transfer station floor, but walls and ceilings. If you see um, retaining wall areas that have some sort of lateral shifting, a lot of subsurface stuff can be caused by poor drainage. So ponding water where it shouldn't be ponding. Those are all great things to look for when you are trying to see what kind of condition your site's in.
I'm sure that regular appraisals are probably something that's already in a plan for most facilities and um, most landfills. But in terms of maybe some considerations or maybe even some challenges that people might not think of, some potential roadblocks that may be hard to foresee. Are you seeing anything that, or you have any advice for people out here at the landfills? Like, hey, this isn't something you might necessarily think of, but it should be.
I think that for some people it might be a surprise. For some people it's not a surprise. But in your leachate pipes, especially if you're not keeping up on the regular maintenance, you're going to get scaling, and if you don't get the scaling, you're going to get the dreaded goo. And I've met a lot of people that haven't had to encounter that, and that's fantastic. But be prepared for that. So again, that regular maintenance and regular inspection on those pumps and cleaning of those pipes, so helpful, especially since the getting the liquid off the landfill liner is one of the most important things we kind of do in our operations. I think your let's see what else. um, the I think coming out of COVID, we're doing a lot better with availability of parts and equipment, but we're still seeing some backlog. So if you have a large project coming up, definitely start thinking earlier rather than later. Even if you're not going to have the funds in until say 2030, and so you don't want to start planning until 2030. No, you really want to look at maybe having your plans done in 2029, so that if you're going to have backlogs or delays, or maybe that maybe the manufacturer that you want to use is not even going to have that pump or that flare or something at that time. So really start early, because it is painful, especially for those operators when you are coming up against a window or when construction comes up against a window. For example, you don't plan your next cell, and in time, your landfill expansion, and then you're filling up, and the landfill operators are going, okay, it's getting narrow up here. When's that cell going to be done? And then there's a strike, and lining operations are shut down for a month. So it's just, yeah, there's some. I think those are some things, and then of course uh, this isn't a surprise, but yeah, the staffing issues, and that is something, especially when we were Archon talking to people, that is everybody's sore spot right now.
Well, when it comes to trying to keep these landfills in tip top shape, I'm sure everybody out there is doing their best, and I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff to consider. I'm sure there's a lot of good news too, though. I'm sure you've been in the industry long enough that the evolution of the evolution of retrofitting, the evolution of repairing the infrastructure, has there been any really interesting advancements or new technology, new techniques, or new changes in the way that that's done in the time that you've been in the industry that you think are very significant and worth mentioning?
Yeah, I think there are some great new uh, products. Uh, so the I'm really interested in kind of watching, especially pricing on the turf closures, and not necessarily just for a final closure, but I really like them for long-term interim. And when we were at Archon, we saw them being used in a spillway, and they'd been there for years, and you can see erosion around the spillway, but the lined spillways looks great, and it is not a black plastic or something. It from afar away it looks a lot better than black plastic or something. I think that of course the what's interesting is the leachate treatment. So when I started 20 plus years ago, uh, reverse osmosis was sort of the emerging technology, but it was expensive, and you always had the residual that you didn't know what to do with, and you tried to burn it and it stank, um, and then they kind of like worked on it in the background for 20 years, and now with PFAS it's coming back to the forefront. And so these new technologies on not necessarily the reverse osmosis, but what to do with the residuals, I'm really interested in. um, and taken a closer look at. I think some interesting things are coming with there with evaporators and encapsulation and things like that. Um, I think that the focus on not necessarily like a product, but just a practice, uh, focusing on safety. Um, I remember he's probably going to kill me for this, but I remember one of the landfill supervisor that I worked with, and we were at work one day, and he's bragging about like he's really sick, but he made it to work anyways, and he's like had to stop the compactor and puke out the and I was and it didn't hit me at the time, but thinking about it years later, like that I think we finally realized like coming to work when you're sick, not just even from a COVID point of view, but coming to work sick is maybe not a good thing because maybe I want you on, if I'm a landfill engineer out doing surveying and things like this and working around the landfill, maybe I want that person in the 120,000 pound piece of machine with cleats and wheels taller than me. Maybe I want them having a good day, not having to puke out the out the door during the day. So I think that shift towards safety has been great.
Fair enough. Uh, but for anybody looking at their own landfills, and again, many of them I'm sure are because many of them are decades old at this point, how can they learn more about what they should be looking for, about what the possibilities are out there, and how can they reach out to you to learn more about beginning the process of repairing the infrastructure or adding on or retrofitting transfer stations?
Absolutely. So if you want to get a hold of me, of course, my email is mlangdon at scsengineers.com. Reach out anytime. If I don't have the answer, I will get you to somebody that can give you the answer, or if there's something I can help you with, I'd love to. And it doesn't necessarily mean I expect you to hire me and give me $20,000 to come out to your site. Maybe it's just a phone call where I can point you to a source of information or a source of a product, or maybe somebody with some expertise to answer your question that I can't. Um, and then of course Swana always their Molo course and their transfer station course, which I believe they're updating the transfer station course right now. They're great. And then James Stewart, who's in charge of the training now, I think he's got some exciting ideas and has been really open to hearing instructors' feedback that are teaching these courses. And so I think that some good things are going to be coming down the line for the courses. So definitely be on the lookout for those. And yeah, just I think there's a lot of people. There's a I can't remember the name of it, but it's a Swana kind of not blog, but a community in online where you can ask questions. And I don't know the exact name of it, but people are really great about answering questions and things like that.
Yeah, are you talking about the discussion board?
Yeah, discussion board. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, we're obviously members of Swana. We actually post, as a matter of fact, we post episodes of Recyclist to the discussion board. So if you're there, you can see all the latest episodes for yourself. But yeah, Swana is also a fantastic resource, but also make sure to check out scsengineers.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
All right. And once again, Michelle, I want to thank you so much for appearing today and talking to us about infrastructure may not always be the most exciting topic, but especially with landfills and many of them, as I've said a half a dozen times already on this episode, being decades old and probably many of them in need of a lot of TLC, a lot of tender loving care at this point. So learning how best to do that without compromising the integrity of the landfill, I think is some incredibly valuable knowledge. And thank you so much for sharing some of it with us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me again. Very, very honored to be here and to talk with you and share a little bit of my experience.
Yeah. And once again, congratulations on your award.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, make sure to check out scesengineers.com. Make sure to reach out to Michelle if you have any questions about infrastructure, retrofitting, anything like that. But do us a favor, if you would. After you've done all that, make sure to check out Diamond Scientific. You can check them out online at diamondsci.com. Industry leaders in gas analysis, instrumentation, and solutions. In addition to the website, you can also reach out to them to set up a personalized presentation just by calling 321 223 7500. I want to thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of Recyclist, and we will see you next time. Thank you.